Say my name. I am awake. I am the danger. I am the one who knocks.
Welcome to the next episode of Breaking into Breaking Bad with Clifford and Caleb Humphrey. This is season 2, episode 8, Better Call Saul. Cabes, am I right? This is one of your favorites?
Oh, it was a classic. Loved it.
Because you're a big fan of the show that comes after Breaking Bad by the name Better Call Saul, am I right?
Exactly. Yeah. So for everyone that's already seen the series, and it ended in 2013, they started another show, which is a prequel to Breaking Bad, called Better Call Saul, and it's fantastic. If you haven't seen it, I definitely encourage you to.
Okay, I haven't seen it, but I do like this character who's introduced in this episode, Saul Goodman, who has several different names, I think, but so the title pretty clearly comes from the character, but the very first scene shows Badger sitting at a park bench on the street, and behind him is an advertisement that says Better Call Saul, right? And it's an advertisement for Saul Goodman, who's a lawyer, a kind of low status one who takes low cases and maybe kind of ambulance chaser kind of guy. But
Yep.
more on him when he enters the scene here in a little bit. Anything else you want to say about the title?
Yeah, no, I mean, other than like when the beginning of the scene where Badger gets caught, you said that Saul Goodman's Better Call Saul logo is there. Just being that ambulance chaser, he just happens to put his logo in an area where drug deals go down, so it's like,
Yeah, right.
he's setting himself
No
up to
accident
represent a certain kind of clientele.
Right. Okay, brief synopsis of this episode. Badger gets busted, and there's a real fear that Badger is going to try and win himself some leniency with the court by ratting on everybody else. So it's always, the prisoner's dilemma in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole show is how can they help get Badger out by providing him some means of getting out without him divulging information on Walt and Jesse and the rest. And that's really the whole show. The only other thing of significance I think that happens is sort of Hank's return to Albuquerque after his traumatizing experience in El Paso. So he comes back and is in the midst of this drug bust interest in getting to Heisenberg, right? And he's the big fish now. Mm-hmm. Now that Tuco is out of the scene. So okay, so the first question I have is, why is Badger so dang stupid? When he gets busted, and that he's making fun of the guy. You're like, come on, clearly you're a cop. You've got these vans here. I know what's going on. He seems to have street smarts. Right, like he knows how, like when to, you when you're dealing with strangers, just some random person who comes walking up and says, "Hey, I want to buy some of your meth," as opposed to a regular customer or a friend of a regular customer, right? He's right to be super suspicious. So he's got the street smarts, but then he completely falls for that really stupid argument that it says in the Constitution, if a cop says he is asked if he's a cop, he is obligated to answer honestly.
Badger,
yeah.
How he was able to get persuaded after literally calling out like the two vans, and he even gave him like, what you really need is like a trash truck. I'm never gonna think a bunch of feds are gonna be sitting in a dumpster type of truck, and just still couldn't help himself, got talked into it.
Right. Yeah, it just makes Badger all the more endearing to me, though. Still my favorite character, I think. So he gets busted, and that presents a huge problem because now he has every incentive to try to get out with as little of jail time as possible, and the feds are gonna be interested, or not the feds, because it's not the feds that bust him, right? It's just the local police.
Right.
But the DEA hears about it right away, and
Mhm.
because they know it's part of this blue meth Heisenberg connection, they're very interested in getting involved in the case.
Right.
So that's happening. What else is happening towards the beginning of the show?
Kind of switching around, you see, Skylar is still pursuing this new job that she got, or old job per se. And, Walt is noticing that she is looking nice and, not your normal attire, and I think he even
Mm.
says like, don't they even have like a casual Saturday, and but she's obviously dressed nice. I think she's obviously enjoying this part of her life right now because whatever it's lacking in with her current situation with Walt. And
Right.
so yeah.
So that's happening with Walt and Skylar. And then there's
Mhm.
also a love interest happening for Jesse, which is
Oh
interesting,
yeah.
right? So Jane's a fascinating character to me because she seems, on one hand, she's got this gothic kind of look. We learn that she's been in 12-step recovery and is thus kind of had a rough past, but has maybe learned some wisdom from it and is really interested in turning it around. And she's probably conflicted then about dating a drug dealer, and she must know, right, that Jesse's a drug dealer.
Right. Yep. I mean, she's obviously putting two and two together, like paid with cash. And then, you also see the um, Walt, showing up at his door and saying, my son is in there and I need to speak with him. Like she was
Right.
seeing, she knew something was shady, so
Right.
yeah, she knows what's going on.
Well, so I think it's important to note is that she's, in a very human way, in a conflicted position where she knows that it's probably not a good idea to get involved in a relationship with a guy like Jesse, and yet she's also, for whatever reason, very attracted to him and attracted to the idea of being his girlfriend. Her attention with him sort of changes a bit when that guy on the motorcycle drives past and goes, "Hey, you're Pinkman. Everybody's talking about you, right?" And maybe she thought, "Wow, this is a really powerful man, and I want to be connected with him somehow." But
Yeah.
however funny that seems, it still, whatever, for whatever reason, she's attracted to him.
Right.
Okay. Also going on is Hank's return to Albuquerque, but he comes really slowly, right? He's staying in bed. He's not talking to anyone. It could be depression, could be trauma, could be all those things. I don't know. He's having a hard time. I'm guessing because he really saw himself as hitting the big time, going to El Paso, leaving the small pond and going to the big pond. Then it's got to be a little humiliating in a way to come back to Albuquerque without any clear explanation for why.
Right. He even
I mean,
mentioned, like, oh, like I was going to go get the the bag out of the truck, for the evidence bag, and that's why I wasn't there. And people are, I think he's just assuming that everyone is talking about him and his shortcomings, but they really weren't shortcomings, and but yeah, also just the traumatic visual of Turtle's head exploding on
yeah,
the turtle, like
right,
it.
right.
It probably was a whole lot, and and then Marie then gets Walt to come over, and
Well,
man, did you see all
that's
the purple
interesting.
that was in that house? Like it was just
I did.
it was overwhelming.
Yeah, still can't understand why. What is up with purple? I've never still have a satisfying explanation for that.
Yep.
But okay, so why does Walt care to want to help Hank and act like a kind of therapist to him?
Well,
Why does Walt care?
I think it's because Walt has figured out he even says this in his little speech. He's like, I've spent all my life worried about what may happen, what may not happen. And it was the fear that kept me back. And now that he's realized that he can conquer that fear, like he said, he is awake, but like he's way more awake now before than like when he even said that in the earlier episodes. And what does he say? Like you get up and you kick that in the like straight in the teeth, and it was almost like he was wanting to share what he has been able to overcome. And you see it has an effect on Hank, because normally Hank has some, smart aleck response like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. And he even said something in the very beginning. What did he say? Something like,
yeah, we don't have experiential overlap.
Yeah, we don't have experiential overlap. And you see Walt's face kind of like, smirk a little bit. But after Walt said that, you see him like, man, like that's true. Like you could see that he took it in.
I think we might have mentioned this before, but Walt's cancer diagnosis brings I think the technical term is mortality salience. He's very much aware of his impending death, right? Like we're all going to die, but we don't walk around all day with that awareness, quite like you would if you got a cancer diagnosis like Walt did. And there's a book that I had my students read this last semester by Winston Churchill. It's a novel called Savrola. And in it, the main character, Savrola, refers to death as the tuning fork of life, when things get confusing and we're not sure what we should do or why we're doing or anything like that. And a condition similar to Hank's, paralyzed with various conflicting feelings and thoughts and all this. So he says death is the tuning fork. It reminds us of what the note is that we should be singing, for example. There's something clarifying about death. And so we've seen how that led to all this kind of courage for Walt that he didn't have before when he gets that. And he starts to do things he never would have done before. So I can understand why he would feel courage now and how he would be able to help Hank in this moment. I understand how he has something to offer Hank. I still don't understand why he would care to help him, though.
I mean, ultimately, family. I think that's the main backbone of it. Yeah, I mean, it was a little situation that he found some similarity in that he's going through. But, as far as, stopping what he's doing in the middle of the day, I don't think he knew what was going on. And maybe he was more curious than anything. And that kind of just led him to respond that way he did.
Yeah, he is family, right? But they're brothers-in-law.
Right.
They're not bloodkin, right? And it's a legal fiction that they're related to one another.
Right.
But what have we seen in the past? Do they seem like, when Walt says he's doing everything for his family, he's only talking about his wife, who he's only related to through law also, and his son, where he does have a blood connection. But he in the past, he's been annoyed at Hank, and I think he's felt genuinely looked down upon by Hank, and Hank does kind of disregard. I mean, he has great affection for Walt in some respect, but he also is like, yeah, no, Walt couldn't handle himself, in a gunfight. He doesn't have the things that I have. When they're playing poker a few episodes back, and what does he say? No offense, Walt, but you wouldn't be able to recognize a criminal, or if he was close enough for you to give him a medical check, I think is what it was. And if you remember, Walt gets angry at that, right?
Yep.
And he could laugh to himself and be like, yeah, this guy just doesn't know anything. Like, if he really knew, like, the criminal's sitting here.
He kind of does do that. Like when, he says there's no experiential overlap, and you see Walt smirk. Like it's almost a way, and maybe this is the point that you brought this up. Maybe it's a way of him selfishly knowing that he is putting himself above Hank, not like 100% like out in the open, but to him, he knows that he is taking like the higher ground, and he's teaching the young lad a thing or two.
Right. Yeah. He can be like, take a knee, coach. I got something to tell you. Right. Yeah, I think that's right. But he's changed, right? In the poker match, if I'm remembering right, he got angry. Here, he's able to just laugh. He doesn't really need Hank to know. He's enjoying having that knowledge that he can offer to him. So yeah, maybe that's just some development in the character, but for whatever reason, whatever the motive, Walt does want to help Hank get, I mean, if you think about it, he wants to help Hank get back into the job that is ultimately contrary to what Walt's mission is, right? Walt should want to hurt the DEA and should be like, you know what, Hank, you're really not, in a good place right now. You need to continue to take some time off, and just because the last thing he wants is for his brother-in-law to be sniffing around his meth empire. So there's a conflict there, and Walt is acting contrary to his interest. And it's either because he has genuine affection for Hank, or like you said, he gets some psychological ego trip off of being able to show that he's got something to help Hank. And you know what?
Right.
Humans are complicated. It's probably a mixture of both. That's just how we are. It's never just all one thing, or rarely is. So
true.
Okay. Hank does have another panic attack, I think, though, right? In this.
Yeah, like in the elevator. That's the place where he does it.
He gets back in the elevator, gets a panic attack, and then he shows back up in the office and he's like, "Hey, people, I'm back!" Right, and it's old Hank immediately, right? He seems to take Walt's advice and tell himself the things that Walt said to tell him, and then he goes in and he's back on back on top, and seems to have done him a lot of good. Okay, enough on Hank.
He gets the good news about the blue stuff still out there, and
they
have a lead, and that kind of gets him going.
Yeah. So now that Badger is caught, they've got to get a lawyer, and Jesse's like, I know just the guy. And so they go in, and this is one of my favorite line, I think, in the whole show, when Jesse says, "We don't need a criminal lawyer right now. We need a criminal lawyer."
Right.
And so then this interesting thing happens in the show, right? Which one of them is going to go into the office, and what do they need? They need someone to go in and say, "Hey, we need you to help get our guy Badger out."
Right. Well, I think there was what was it, $10,000 cost of doing business, and so they needed to someone had to come in there and drop off the 10 grand. And that was the whole thing. Like, all right, he's going to give him the best legal representation. Here's 10 grand. When they were having this discussion, Walt is just, his automatic knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, wait, well, obviously, why are we even talking about this? It's not going to be me. I'm a family man. I blah, 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 and then Jesse finally sticks up for himself and is like, well, it can't be me either. Like why are you pushing this on me? And of course they do the coin toss, and Walt's like 0 for 2 now on coin tosses, and so he lost, and that was him.
Yeah, interesting that he leaves this decision to fate. And I just rewatched The Dark Knight Rises, or whichever one it is, with the Dark Knight with the Joker and Two-Face, right? And Two-Face's whole thing is he enjoys the rush of leaving life and death choices to fortune. Right, because you're not making but here we see Walt and Jesse doing the same thing, leaving these really important decisions up to fate, instead of thinking, okay, no, let's put the pros and cons on a ledger and see which one makes the most sense. They're not doing that anymore. They're just going to leave it up to fate, and so that's interesting to me. But you're right, it's not the first time we've seen it. So they go in, and Walt then learns something. So this is the question that I had, though. So why is Saul Goodman representing Badger? Isn't it just that he was the court appointed guy? It wasn't
Well,
like they sought him out, right?
if you remember, he actually went in there thinking that it was a different case, and he's like, "Oh, okay, you're the person that did this," and
Well, I
Badger's
thought
like,
he had
"Well,
no, I thought he had both cases. He had that case, the
right,
public indecency guy. We'll just leave it at that. And then Walt. So he had both of them. But I think it's because he was the I think he just randomly got paired with Badger. I don't think they went and sought him out, right? I thought he was
yeah."
sort
I
of
mean,
court
I don't know
appointed.
the. I should probably ask the wife this. She might know this since she's as a paralegal. But like for those for the clients that don't have representation, like could a lawyer just show up and be like, "Hey, I'm your guy," and this is what you're gonna do.
No, right. I mean, I don't know the answer to this either, but I think there are a number of lawyers that put their names on a list for the court to say, hey, if you have somebody who doesn't have representation, then you can call me and I'll take the court's minimum fee and I'll represent them.
Right.
Right. I think that's right. The lawyers who listen to this can correct us and send us complaints for this. But the point is that I think they get randomly paired with Saul Goodman. Right. And so, and then Walt and Jesse, what do they want to pay him the $10,000 to do?
The $10,000 is what Saul said was basically the retainer to represent Badger in a sense, but they don't know what the strategy is or anything like that. They're just saying,
right,
Jesse's experience is like, hey, this guy got Emilio off like twice, and they had him dead to rights. So like in his mind, it's like whatever he does, he knows what to do, and the 10 grand is just the cost of doing business.
Yeah. This is really complicated though. Unless I'm misunderstanding it, here's what I think happens. I think it's just by chance that Badger gets paired up with Saul Goodman. It's also, and separately, Walt and Jesse go to him, and in Jesse's mind, it's because they want to pay him a lot of money to be a really good lawyer and get Badger off, get him to go free, right? But then when Walt figures out that the way that he's going to get him free is by offering to give information to the feds, in the office there, Walt makes the split decision. I'll pay you $10,000 to throw the case, be a bad lawyer for Badger, get Badger thrown in prison for the rest of his life, but don't you dare make a deal with the DEA.
Right.
Now, if Jesse had heard that, he would have been furious because he's like, no, Badger's my guy. We're not going to throw the case and have him thrown in prison, right? And Saul Goodman's like, no, you don't understand. He won't survive in prison, right? But then Walt goes back to the car and says he wouldn't take the bribe.
But Jesse was like, what?
Right, but why? What was the bribe that Jesse thought they were offering?
Was Jesse privy to that? Because I don't know if Jesse knew that Badger was having a deal to talk with the DEA, so maybe that might have been Walt just thinking on his feet, like, hey, whoa, because he was surprised. He's like, whoa, what do you mean DEA? And so that was him kind of responding to the situation.
I think what's missing, what we don't see, is the conversation where Walt tells Jesse, here's the deal. We've got to bribe him,
right,
to throw the case. But now Jesse's in a very difficult position because he wants to find a way to help get Badger out that does not require him to give information on the rest of them.
Right.
So then they resort to the plan to kidnap Saul Goodman and scare him into helping them. But of course, that fails pretty comically as well when he discovers who they are, right? When Walt starts coughing and he's like, I know who you are. Take the ski masks off. And
right. Mr. Mayhew, take your
Mr. Mayhew. That's right. Yeah. It's interesting that we get to see how he thinks about the law, right? He's like, each of you put a dollar bill in my pocket. Now I'm legally representing you. So he knows how to thrive and play by the rules or how to win, how to sort of cheat and play by the rules, right? Within some structure, right? So if you put a dollar bill, now I can't be required to say anything, because there's client
privilege.
Yeah, right. So I don't have to. We can speak freely now.
Yeah, excellent negotiation.
Yeah, right. And I think it's at this point that Saul realizes that, and not only is he trying to save his own life because he's afraid they're going to kill him, but he knows, okay, I might be able to make a good deal with these guys and get some of this money that's being made, because he knows it's a big deal if the DEA is involved.
Well, it's funny also because once after they put the money in him and he's their client now, he's like, well, why don't we just kill Badger? And then Walt's face
Walt's
is
like, yeah, no, good idea. Yeah.
Well, that's something I haven't considered.
And
Jesse,
just pros and cons. Let's just think about this.
Yeah. Jesse was like, no way, no doing that, no shiving Badger and
no
line.
shanking Badger. Yeah, right.
But it was pretty funny. It's like, so we're sure it's off the table, and Walt's still like,
well,
okay.
maybe, yeah, right,
yeah,
right. No, it's funny. Well, so then they come up with a brilliant plan to get this, to pay this convict who is in and out of prison. I still not exactly sure how that plan works. So this guy volunteers to go to prison for long periods of time, and then when he gets out, he gets lots of money.
Well, yeah, he said basically, the outside world hasn't been too kind to this guy, and so he actually prefers it in in prison. It reminded me of the Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about that too. Yeah,
sometimes
people get institutionalized. Yeah,
and
but he still wants to make money so that when he does get out, he's set.
Or which means he's doing a Walt scenario, which we don't know. Like, he could be doing it for someone else. Who knows? They don't really go into that.
Yeah, true.
But the one thing I thought was pretty
James Kilkenny,
it was pretty crazy, is that when Saul sits them down and goes over the strategy, he says, now this is going to cost you 1 pound of your finest blue meth and $80,000. And he's like, what, 80,000? And he's like, well, 50 of it goes to me. They didn't try to negotiate that number at all. They just were so taken back by what Saul was saying that they took it for what it was, and they just said, okay, this is the number. They just had this guy out in the desert threatening him, and Saul does not feel threatened anymore. He
knows that killing Badger is off the table,
right?
And he knows that Badger making a deal with the DEA is off the table, which means there's only one option left, and he knows that, so he's going to take him absolutely to the cleaners for it.
Yep.
And he knows they've got the money, so they're gonna pay it.
It just shows the thinking of Saul is definitely far beyond Walt and Jesse right now. He's thinking all different angles, probably because he's been doing this racket for a long time now. I thought that was pretty telling.
There's one line in all of this back and forth with Saul that I'm trying to remember the exact place now, but the line was chilling, where Walt says there's more than one kind of prison. And
Walt says that to Saul.
I think he says it to Saul. Yeah. But it's one of these lines that just stand alone, right? As a sort of philosophical point. But I'm wondering, what is Walt thinking of specifically when he says there's more than one kind of prison? It led me to think, okay, well, he felt like his life before he was awake. When he was awake, he looked back on his old life, and I think he saw it as a kind of prison where he's stuck in a pattern of living that is a perpetual losing, and he's not ever going to get out of it, right? He's not going to all of a sudden have a bunch of students that come in that are just, their lives are transformed because of his chemistry class. I say that as a teacher. I understand that fantasy. Everything's, what a great, life is completely transformed. Like, yeah, no, that doesn't happen like that very often. But gray matter, his chance at making it big and having the patent that sells millions and millions, like that's not going to happen. So I think he looks back at his old life and thinks that was a kind of a prison.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But I think we can also look at the life that he's living now, where the consequences that he's suffering, I mean, it already sort of looks like a gerbil on a wheel a little bit, where they go to such great lengths to make their money, and then something happens and they lose it all. And they're back to square one. I mean, it's sort of Sisyphus, right? Rolling the stone up the hill and rolling it down and doing the whole thing over again. Even though it's kind of exciting in some ways, there's danger and all of that, but it's still, they're not getting the reward that they, at least for Walt, I guess, that he thought he was going to get, that would make it all worth it, all more worthwhile.
Right.
So that's a lesson he's learning. But anyway, that line I found just kind of haunting. There's more than one kind of prison.
Yeah, no, it's true. So
Okay.
Next is the exchange, right?
Yes. Now this whole thing was just as comical as could be. I mean, everything that could go wrong does go wrong. So Badger is supposed to recognize who Heisenberg is, right? Because he's supposed to be handing over Heisenberg. And they've arranged with this guy, James Kilkelly, to pose as Heisenberg and to take the fall and to go to prison. And so, the wrong old man sits down at the bench where Badger is, and he's waiting for the guy to initiate, and it's not happening, right? And then Walt has to, I mean, it's really, it showed a lot of thinking on the feet and some courage, when Walt's like, just get out there and do something. And I don't think it's until after that he comes up with the plan of driving around in front of Hank, blocking his view, all that. But it shows some high level, not just strategy and thinking, but daring on Walt's. He's willing to take some enormous risks, knowing that they've gone all in. Right? They don't have enough money, I don't think, to do this twice.
Yeah. I mean, the problem solving skills that he was able to implement right away when he saw it, like he didn't take too long to think about it. He just went for it, and like you said, he dropped Jesse off and he didn't know what he was going to do, but he was going to do something. And he just pulled up and he just started blabbing away, and then you see Jesse walk behind, like, wrong guy, other bench, wrong guy, other bench. And, it's just very, very daring, but I loved to see him respond that way. It was good.
There were some elements that left me wondering, why did they do it that way? So one thing was when Jesse then gets back in the car, he has a hard time getting in the car.
Yeah,
like, why did they add that? Like, what does that bring to, is
just
it just
end of the comicalness of what just took place,
right?
Like,
no, on top of that, he has a problem getting back in the car. Yeah. So it just added, it got slapstick almost. I mean, it's over the top. It's Three Stooges level. Like,
but it's one of those things. It's like, I want to know, was that part of the writing or was that improv? Like, was the door supposed to open, but it was locked, and then he just went for it, and they're like, "Oh, keep rolling. This is great." Like,
yeah, no,
that happens a lot more.
True. Yeah, it could have been an element of accident in the filming that they said, let's just keep it. It didn't have, not everything has to necessarily have an intention behind it.
Right.
But yeah, okay, fair enough. Well, I just thought it was interesting. I mean, that was the way it was. So, okay, so it works out. Everything's fine. And this episode ends with Saul walking into Walt's chemistry class, which terrifies Walt, right?
Yeah, big time.
Because now he knows that Saul knows his real identity.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got power over him now.
Yeah. Well, the first thing he says is like, is this some kind of blackmail? Like, what are you doing here? Right.
Yeah. And then we get some lovely Godfather I forget the son, the consigliere's name, but he says, what did this guy do to Vito Corleone? What how did it change the game for the Godfather to have this lawyer and advisor? That's what I want to be for you. And he says, right now you're Fredo, you're the incompetent second born son who couldn't handle it, but thought he could. And so anyway, I thought that was kind of classy. Made me want to watch The Godfather again. So we're left wondering, okay, are we going to see Saul Goodman again? Or was this just a one-off seeing him here? But
well, yeah, but that was the whole point. Like he wanted to be what was he called, a silent partner, because
right.
He says,
I'll just offer advice.
Yeah, like if you'd like to keep the money that you're making, then like you need me, and it shouldn't be this easy. Yeah, it's like it shouldn't be this easy for someone to find you.
Yeah, right.
So
well, we're reminded of how little street smarts Walt has, and to whatever degree Jesse has them, they're still pretty immature. And exactly. Saul is he's kind of a professional.
Well, that's, I think, then the main reason why Walt entertains this idea of partnering up with someone, because one, he doesn't know this person, but he knows that he's a criminal as well. And so there's that level of mutual destruction that they have over one another that keeps them binded together in some, like, hey, we're doing bad things right now, but I got you and you got me, so like it's going to keep us from doing anything bad. And it gives them, I think it gives him like an idea of, okay, I can see myself trusting this person and he's valuable, but I don't know how this is going to work. And we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, he gives them the example of, he says, think about what you're doing with your money. This is, what are you keeping it under your mattress right now? And like, we know where he's kept it, right in his freaking air conditioning vent.
Right.
And so he knows that's a dumb idea. So if they're going to scale, which is what Walt wants to do, Saul's flagging this problem you're going to have. Like, where are you going to put this money that's going to be safe? How are you going to launder it and all of that? So he gives him that. But, as you're talking, I'm reminded of how Walt first approached Jesse, right? He did it by blackmailing him, basically. You help me or I'm going to go to the cops and turn you in. Does Saul do the same thing to Walt?
In a
Walt
sense, yes.
Walt certainly thinks he does, right? Because he's like, you're here to blackmail me because so that's my point, is that Saul has all the leverage. If he wanted, he could provide evidence and get and throw Walt under the bus. I don't think Walt has any hard evidence necessarily that he could get leverage on Saul. Saul's kind of too smart for that. He could just deny everything. So I guess my point is that I don't know if it's a mutual guilt situation that does happen with Jesse and Walt after they murder Crazy Eight, right?
Right. Yeah.
So at this point, Saul does seem to have a little bit of the upper hand, but I think Saul also knows if he opens himself up to a partnership with these guys, he stands to make a lot of money.
Oh yeah, he's definitely looking at this as a business decision.
And he knows that these guys, as incompetent as they are capable of hurting him, right? I mean, like, they almost shot him and left him in the desert, right?
Right.
As comical as that scene was, but okay. Well,
but he also said, like, you guys are onto something. The DEA was over this, right. And so he is seeing the money signs at this point.
That's right. Yeah, he recognizes that Walt's got something special. Yeah. Okay, well, so we're probably not this is probably not the last we're gonna see of Saul Goodman.
We'll see, yes.
Okay, well, I guess we'll just have to watch another episode then.
Okay, well, as always, like, share, subscribe, and please consider, after the close of this episode, giving us a 5-star rating. We'd like to hear any kind of comments you have. always, we ask that you, if you don't follow us on the Apple podcast, we're on YouTube, we're on the Patreon account, we're on Twitter. It's the username is pretty sure it's the same one across. It's Breaking Into Breaking Bad or Breaking Into BB. Until next time, when we break into the next episode of Breaking Bad.